everyone. My name's Ellie Garrity, and I'm the manager of alumni career programs with the UMD Alumni Association. We're so excited that you're able to join us for today's interactive webinar, Leveling Up Your Career Through Feedback with Michael Seelman. This webinar is brought to you by the Alumni Association's inaugural Career Week, a week-long virtual series to help alumni like you conquer, steer, and advance your career. This webinar will be recorded. By participating, you acknowledge and consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. We have a lot of information to cover today, and we will take questions at the end of the webinar, so feel free to submit any questions you have using the chat box located at the bottom of the Zoom panel. Now, about our presenter, Michael Seelman. Michael has coached 150 plus leaders in North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia to bring out their best performance and a more fulfilled life. Client companies include Google, Amazon, Reddit, Sony, Salesforce, Microsoft, and many others. He's a professional certified coach and a psychological safety team coach, practitioner, and trainer. He served his country through leadership roles at the White House, FBI, and Homeland Security and Communications, employee engagement, knowledge management, innovation, IT, and national violence reduction. He's a former student member of the University System of Maryland Board of Regents. Michael, I will hand it right over to you to get things started.
Ellie, thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. It's good to be doing a presentation with you again. What I wanted to start off with is talk about what was the inspiration behind this workshop. And that's this book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, by Marshall Goldsmith. He's thought of the #1 executive coach in the world. And you can see here in the bullet points some of the bona fides he has for having that title, and one of the leading leadership thinkers, certainly in the popular press. And in this book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, the major concept is there's certain things that got us to this level of success. What's going to help us level up our career to the next level of success is to get feedback from our stakeholders. And our stakeholders can be those that we work with, those that we live with. And feedback means that they might give us suggestions of areas that we can get even better as leaders. And in a business setting, that might mean our direct reports, the people that we lead every day. And it might also mean our peers, our colleagues in the organization, those that serve in management roles with us. And then the above us, it might be our boss, our manager, for the CEO, the board of directors for our company. And getting feedback from those all around us from that 360 enables us to be even more effective as leaders. That's the major message out of this book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And the stakeholder-centered coaching process that we're talking about here is used by at least 150 of the Fortune 500 corporations, including also many public organizations in government. And when you talk about what behaviors do people perhaps get feedback that they might be able to work on, well, here are some that kind of are in the communications area. And I want to go through some of these. And in the chat window, you should have a document. Ellie, if you can make sure people have that as a handout. If not, we can resend it, because I know it's a little hard to read on your screen. But there's 20 things here, that behaviors that are flawed communications patterns that we could probably change. We might get feedback on these kind of changes. Some of us might be inclined to trying to win too much. We look at every situation as a competition, and that can affect the way we communicate and collaborate with others. It might be we try to add too much value. That's one of the flaws or ways I could improve that's been pointed out to me in the past, and that Ellie and I will do a short exercise on to demonstrate when we get to the interactive portion. Also, passing judgment. It might be look at, we're trying to rate others by our standards as we come across as too judgmental. Also, fourth one might be making destructive comments, being sarcastic. I had a client that was had a sense of humor and sometimes a little too cutting for the people around them. sometimes we might have a suggestion or idea of someone else and we respond, yeah, that's good, but, or no, or however, here's another way we might do it. That's kind of negating the suggestion or what came before. So we want to be careful of those comments. Number 6 here is telling the world how smart you are, like trying to prove yourself. That's something that my wife has pointed out to me. She said to me before, it's like, Michael, are we trying to come to a solution here, or are you just trying to be right? And I've tried to be a lot better about that since she pointed that out to me. And number 7 is speaking when angry. Sometimes we get angry and then we speak in a way that's not loving towards our colleague or towards our family member. Number 8 is that we might have negativity. We might, let me explain why that wouldn't work. Or we tried that 5 years ago and it didn't work. Number 9 is we might withhold information. We're going to refuse to share something we know that might be helpful to someone else. That's another kind of communication flaw we might have. Number 10 is failing to give proper recognition. So if Ellie came up with a great suggestion, I said, here's a suggestion that Ellie came up with. Or if it was one member of my team, here's a suggestion of a member of my team, and maybe I had them present it at the all hands because it was their suggestion. And that kind of leads into number 11 here, claiming credit that we do not deserve, and we're overestimating our successes. Number 12 is making excuses. Well, that's just the way I am. You might find it annoying, but that's the way I am. So number 13 here is clinging to the past. Is a need to deflect blame away from ourselves and onto other people, because that's their problem. That's the way they've always had that problem in the past. Number 14 is playing favorites. So we might say, oh, I like John. I go to lunch with John. So let's hear from John. But then when Susan gives a suggestion, we're not really listening to Susan because we don't go to lunch with Susan. We don't play golf with Susan. So we don't want to play favorites when we're trying to be open to communication. Number 15 is refusing to express regret. Sometimes we have even a notable public figure that wouldn't ever say they made a mistake or express regret for actions they've had. Number 16 is not listening. You might have a passive aggressive format, someone crossing their arms, say, yeah, you tell me what you have to say, but they're not really listening or open to other suggestions. Number 17 is failing to express gratitude. So when someone steps up and offers, we're going to hear about when they offer us feedback, we're going to make sure to express thanks for it, even if it's sometimes hard to hear. It's sometimes hard to hear that we're not perfect. Number 18 is to punish the messenger. So if someone brings some information to us and then we think, oh, they're immediately in my firing range, maybe they're a subordinate, so they're an easy target for our angst or our anger. So we don't want to punish the messenger that's bringing us important information. Passing the buck, not my department, above my pay grade. Right? Might hear suggestions like that or responses like that. Those aren't helpful communication techniques. And then finally, number 20 is having an excessive need to be me, exalting our faults as virtues simply because they're who we are. So that goes back to that title, What Got Us Here Won't Get Us There. Perhaps we think that being tough on our people is the way we had this level of success, perhaps as a salesperson or as a first level supervisor of sales, and we say, I'm tough on people. That's how I get results. But then we get feedback. Well, actually, you make people cry. You have a lot of turnover in your team. That's because you have excessive, well, that's the way I am. That's what's gotten me here, not being open to change. So this first group of things are some feedback that we might get in terms of our communication style that we could receive from others. So I want to pause here for a moment because I covered a lot of material. And if you could, let me know in the chat, and Ellie will be monitoring for us. Is this making sense? Is this resonating for people? I'd love to hear your feedback in the chat. If you recognize some of the behaviors or that make sense to you, let's put some of our comments in the chat. And then maybe Ellie, if you could share some of the things that people are saying there.
Sure, I'll give folks just a second to get something through to the chat, but Michael, is there a specific one that stands out to you from this list of 20?
Yeah, thank you, Ollie. For me, I think I mentioned that adding too much value. I had one point in my FBI career, I had several supervisors that were reporting to me, and one of my supervisors said, Michael, sometimes when one of us makes a suggestion or our team makes a suggestion, you have this desire to really help and to make it even better. And so you make a suggestion. And sometimes it's maybe just better to go with it so that people own it. And that's I've read when I got that feedback, I've read more about it since then, that behavior. And then people don't feel like they own it as much as if you just went with their initial suggestion. You think it's good enough. And so that's one that resonates with me. I talked about the feedback my wife gave me about wanting to show how smart I am or trying to be right. That's some feedback I've gotten. And it hurts sometimes to hear that feedback at first. But then you realize, why, hey, I can let go of the past, I can move forward and get even better.
Absolutely. It looks like we have some folks agreeing with you in the chat. Elaine says, this all makes sense, and you may not be aware of these behaviors in yourself and others. So it's good to go through this. And Kareem seems to think the same. So it seems like folks are digesting this info as it comes in.
Thank you so much, Ellie. And also, are people able to access that document that we put into the chat too?
Yes, I got a thumbs up that folks can access it, but feel free to chat me privately if you can't see it, but it looks like people have access.
Awesome. Okay. So I know that was a lot to absorb. We're packing a lot here into this webinar. And so now next, what I want to do is go to the next slide and then show you that in Marshall's experience, so Marshall Goldsmith, as I mentioned, is thought of #1 executive coach in the world. I've been certified in his same methodology when I work with my clients. Sometimes we use the stakeholder centered coaching. That's what we like. We have other methodologies as well. In his experience of working with clients, here's the 20 most often worked on leadership skills. And so now we're going to go through those. And again, I'm going to go a little bit quickly, but you have that handout so you can go through it and start thinking about what resonates with you. Maybe you've gotten feedback from a supervisor, colleague, direct report, and see which ones resonate for you because coming up soon, we're gonna have an exercise where you get to practice asking for feedback on that. And then your partner is gonna be able to also practice giving you feedback. So we're gonna get to how to do that skill set. So think about now, what of these resonates with you? All right, so let's jump right in. 20 most often worked on leadership skills. #1, treat others with respect. So sometimes we might not treat others with respect, particularly when we're in a leadership position, because we're in a power position where people have to handle us. They have to deal with us because of our direct reports. They don't want to get a bad performance rating, or maybe we're the CFO of the organization. People don't want our budgets cut. So they just have to deal with us. So that could be something we might work on based on feedback. #2 is building trust. So sometimes maybe we haven't acted as trustworthy, or we made commitments that we didn't follow through on. Sometimes because we think, oh, I'll be able to get to that. I'll promise to get it back to them the same day. And sometimes we don't follow through on our commitments. And that can hurt our trust. As one of my leadership professors, I'm doing my PhD in organizational leadership right now in the University of Maryland system. And one of my professors, when we were talking about ethics, he said, do what you say you're going to do, right? That's the way to build trust. Do what you say you're going to do. #3, listen to different points of view with an open mind before giving your own opinion. So if you're the CEO and you have your C-suite team, what some CEOs do in their team meetings is they don't give their opinion on whatever is being discussed until everyone else has had a chance to give their opinion. Because Ellie, if I'm the CEO and you're on my C-suite team and I give my opinion first, what are the chances that you're going to speak up and give a different opinion?
Pretty small chances that I'd speak up there.
Right. So that's one way you can do it. You signal your openness by reserving giving your opinion because you really want to hear others first. So that's one way you can practice that. Thank you, Ellie. #4 is to try to delegate more effectively. I go over this with a lot of my clients. They're accomplished people, they're talented, they're optimistic. So they think, oh, I can get to that. My team is feeling a bit burdened right now. I don't want to have to give this to them. Or I have a technical skill. I can get this done quickly. And so they don't delegate as effectively as they could. What a rule of thumb I give my executive clients is start with only the things that you can do. And if anyone else can do them, consider delegating that or not doing it if it's not that important, right? Start with only the things you can do when you're in a leadership role, and then consider delegating everything else. And you empower them, give them the resources, give them some direction, but then you see if they can do it. And then you're not going to be sitting on it. Or, as I got feedback from my folks when I was a new supervisor, sometimes because I sat on it because I thought I could do it and not burden them, then I'm giving it to them at the last minute when it's due and I realize I didn't get it done. So do yourself a favor and your team a favor and delegate effectively early on. Number 5, stand up to individuals who undermine teamwork, right? There might be people on your team that don't have a positive attitude, that maybe they could use some feedback from you, and so that they can get on the right course, so the others don't have to suffer in silence with them around. Number 6, develop an executive presence. What does that mean? That means being comfortable, speaking your mind, listening well, dressing well, that people take you seriously and you have gravitas when you communicate. Number 7, address conflict constructively and timely. So sometimes, and I have this with some of my clients, they might sort of be aware of some conflict, but it's not that bad. I'll let it keep going. And then when it gets to be really bad, it's harder to address. People have dug in their heels, gotten angry with one another. And it's harder to solve once it gets to that point. So I encourage you to do yourself a favor and try to intervene earlier. Number 8, collaborate with others. Sometimes we're good as individual performers, but we're not necessarily the best at collaborating with others. So that could be a worked on skill based on feedback you might get or your intuition you have. Number 9, develop and link team strategy to the business strategy. In the FBI, when we had our team, we tried to make sure that our team's mission was linked to the overall mission of the FBI to protect American citizens and uphold the Constitution, to stay ahead of the threat. How what we doing supports those. And when I was there with the FBI Director Bob Mueller, I was his chief of internal communications, and one of my roles to say, okay, he would have to lay it out his top 10 priorities, and then anything that we were working on, we try to link back to those to make sure we are advancing the FBI mission to post 9/11. We all wanted to be very focused in addressing the threat from Al-Qaeda and other sources. So link what your team's doing with the overall strategy and business of the organization. And stand up for what I believe in. That's number 10. Let people know what you believe in. Sometimes I have these clients that are executives in Silicon Valley. You heard that Ellie referred to some of them, and say, okay, well, what do you believe in? And have an owner's manual, kind of in software speak, or a README manual. Tell people what your values are. Let them know so they know how to expect certain behavior from you because of what you believe is what your values, what's important to you. Number 11 is holding people accountable, setting up systems for accountability. If you said something that your employee didn't do that, follow through with them. Let them know there's somebody watching, some accountability. Again, you don't have to do it in anger or be obnoxious, but you just bring it back up. I thought we had this commitment that this would be done by this date for our customer. I know it's coming up on that date. And then when they missed the deadline, didn't achieve that, didn't notify our customer, hold them accountable. Number 12, present with self-confidence. Sometimes with my women clients, executives, they'll be humble. And it shows up and we do their 360 when they self-evaluate. They're more humble than other people think they're even better leaders than they think of themselves. But they don't necessarily present with self-confidence. Might use minimizing language. I can do that myself sometimes. Say, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, but I don't want to take up too much time. Perhaps you already thought of it. Those are some things that can undermine your presentation because it seems like you don't have confidence. And there's a great book that Marshall wrote with Sally Helgeson, international women's leadership expert, that talks about that. That's one of the habits that can hold men back. These are generalizations that can hold men back too, but be careful about how you present. Speak with confidence. Number 13, focus on the critical few issues. You don't need to, especially for presenting to an executive audience, don't need everything your team's working on. What are the critical things relevant to that audience? Number 13 was the critical issues. Number 14 is become more assertive. Some people need to be more assertive. Some people maybe need to be less assertive. So it might depend. I mean, based on feedback, you might want to work on that. Number 15 is take appropriate risks. One of the things that helps people move up through an organization is they're willing to take risks. If we stay with just the status quo, we're probably not going to make breakthroughs of productivity, probably not going to make breakthroughs of new product offerings, probably not going to make breakthroughs of exponential increases in our mission accomplishment. So if you take appropriate risks, then you're more likely to have those breakthroughs or the 10x improvement in productivity. And number 16, build cross-functional relationships. So as we move up in the organization, often we have to understand other parts of the mission and support those other efforts. So it's important to have those cross-functional relationships to work with colleagues in your management team. Sometimes you need their support to also accomplish your team's mission. So it's good to have that relationships. I had a boss at the FBI who was really good at that. He would sometimes say, okay, hey, can I take you out, a fellow assistant director? I want to work this out so that my team can move forward. He had great collaborative relationships with his peers. And he had a good sense of humor that helped them listen to him and say, okay, John, all right, let's make it happen. And he was very good at that. Number 17, become a better coach and mentor. So as you improved, you're now in a leadership position, you're helping other people advance in leadership as well. It can also be from one of my clients, as they're trying to help or mentor others, it helps them remind themselves of their own lessons and things that advice they should be following. Number 18, match my leadership style to specific needs of others. This is something I often talk with my clients about, is we might have a certain style. I tend to have a collaborative style, but you could have a more directive style. It could have a more achievement-oriented style. These are coming out of the rubric of path goal theory. And so you might think, okay, what's my natural style? What are my team members or followers? What are their preferences? What style might they prefer? You might not know. You could ask them, well, tell me about the best boss you ever had. That's one way of finding out how their preference is for leadership. And you might try to adapt your style to what they would prefer or what the task might call for. So perhaps in the Q&A, if you want more about that, we can get into that further. And then number 19, present my point of view persuasively. So you have a perspective, a point of view, you go ahead and present it persuasively and still be open to other point of views as well. I would add as a corollary to number 19. And finally, number 20, try to become more decisive. Again, not necessary for everyone, but some of us, that might be a goal they're trying to choose. Someone might come to us and say, hey, Michael, can we do option A, B, or C? You might say, oh, let me think about it. Can I get back to you tomorrow? And then tomorrow goes past, and Wednesday and Thursday, and it's next week, and they're like, oh, you're losing trust because you weren't able to make a decision. I can tell you, when I met with Bob Mueller, we had a certain way we had to present our memos to him as the head of the FBI, and they had a decision tree. It was like a short description, and it was options A, B, C. He would go through it. He's like, 1A, yes. 2B, yes. 3C, tell me more about that, Michael. I'll explain it. Okay, yes. It would be a way presented for him so he could be very decisive in the meeting, and then you could move on and meet with the president of the Oval Office or his colleagues at MI5 or wherever it might be. I wanted to present in a way that he could make that decision. And then he also wanted to use my time well, he would make a decision quickly. So we want to be decisive and present also materials so others can be decisive easily. So those are the top 20 most worked on leadership skills that Marshall Goldsmith has found in his experience. And as you saw, I've also worked on many of these with my clients. So let's go again to the chat, Ellie. See if people have if any of these are resonating on, think there might be some of the things that they would want to work on, or if it makes sense, or if anyone's saying, hey, can you go over number 15 a little bit more? What are we getting in the chat, Ellie?
Sure. Yeah. I'll give folks a chance to write in. Oh, it looks like someone's writing directly on the screen there, which one they're pointing to. But I would say for myself, and I'm still kind of digesting that great example you just gave of Bob Mueller and him just saying 1A, yes, that's so direct. And I love that. But one of the ones I'm definitely working on is number 4, delegating more effectively and efficiently, right? Because I want to be delegating in a way that makes sense to getting that task done, delegating it to the right person, and making sure when I am delegating it, I'm giving that person everything that they need to be successful in that task. So it's one of the things I'm working on. I'll see if anything else comes through on the chat here. And actually, we have a question that's come in. How can we practice being more assertive and confident in the workplace? That's a great question from, looks like, Mona.
Being more assertive and confident, right? So if we go back to our values, and we've done a lot of my women clients, and it's in Sally and Marshall's book, also want to do their research, their homework, and then say, okay, I'm going to present my ideas. And usually there's a team. And if someone else thinks it's not a good idea, or they can help modify the idea to make it even better, then they're going to comment. They're going to contribute. And another way of looking at it is, what's the worst that could happen? We try it out, and maybe it's wildly successful. Maybe it's okay so far, and we can make it even better. Or maybe it fails, and we learn from it, and we move on. One of the things that Marshall and Sally talked about, Marshall, and if you read that book, he's made some mistakes, and there's a great video of them lecturing together. He made some very embarrassing mistakes, and Sally's like, how did you move on from that, Marshall? He's like, hey, I'm an old man. I travel a lot, and I made some mistakes. Like one time he forgot to pack some appropriate clothes to go up on stage, and he just arrived in the town. He's like, hey, can we go by the Walmart so I can pick up some pants that are appropriate slacks to wear on stage? And they're like, sure. And, I might be really embarrassing. Oh, I didn't pack. He's like, I travel a lot. I might miss something. And one of the times that this is pre-pandemic, of course, when we travel, and, he says, oh, well. And Sally loved that so much. She put that up, like, I think a sticker on her monitor. She says, oh, well, right? This is how to be more confident is just say, oh, well, what's the worst that could happen? But there's also an opportunity cost of not speaking up and not being confident. The people, your colleagues, your team, your mission doesn't get the benefit of what you have to add. And then we had that personality pointed out, the cross-functional relationships. A quick story about that is there was a new unit chief that was my title at the FBI, came in, and she was the head of the IT help desk. And I knew what it was like being a new unit chief. It can be a tough environment at the FBI, particularly it was post 9/11, a lot going on. So I reached out to her, said, hey, let's just go to lunch. I know what it's like to be a new unit chief. Happy to just be in companionship with you. And we did that. And then I had a big challenge where my team moved offices, and we were handled all the communications internally for the FBI director and the executive team. We executed on a lot of those communications. We had things we had to do every day, and half my team's computers weren't working because of the move. So I needed the help from the IT unit chief, and I reached out to her because I had built that cross-functional relationship. I said, hey, I'm not asking to be advanced in the queue. I know you got a lot of tickets team's got to handle, but is there any way we can help solve this? She's like, yeah, well, I don't have much demand for my team at like 4 a.m. on Saturdays. I was like, oh, okay. If I can have someone on my team get some overtime to come in Saturday morning and give you access to the team's computers, would that work? Absolutely. Someone on my team volunteered. Boom, we got it done. That was because I built those cross-functional relationships. All right. Anything else in the chat, Ellie?
Yeah, great example of the importance of interpersonal skills in the workplace. Absolutely. We had a couple of questions. Another one similar to kind of building the confidence in the workplace. Maybe you could address how you develop that executive presence. And then follow up to that, number 12, Amanda just made a comment. She's often had to edit out words like maybe, possibly, might be when she's trying to present with confidence or maybe even present with that executive presence. So a note from Amanda, love that. And then Michael, do you want to comment on maybe developing some of that executive presence?
Yeah, sure. So that executive presence, really important. And the minimizing words is the example we got, I think, from Amanda. And so when we're working on that, I heard they're working on it, so great. So one in the mindset is think, those are a habit. I had a challenge in the past, and going forward, I'm changing my habits. I can grow. So first is having that mindset shift that I can change, I can grow. And then when you're presenting, you can have a friend in that meeting, executive meeting, say, tell me how I did. Watch how I did. Did I use that minimizing language? Was I more assertive? Did I present with more confidence? Did I have my executive presence? And you ask for their feedback afterwards. You have that buddy. And maybe you do the same for them, something they're working on, and you can give them feedback. You can have that accountability partner, that partner that's trying to help you, you give some feedback. One of my clients, who's a vice president of her company, she even asked her boss to do that because he was the only one in the senior leadership meeting that might have that feedback. And they've worked it out, and she's gotten much better, and he gives her very positive feedback because he's also paying attention and seeing her do better at it. So depending on the relationship with your boss or a colleague could help you as you work on that executive presence, give you that feedback. Anything else, Ellie, or should we move on to the next?
No, I think we're ready to move on. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellie. And so then, as we're talking about this, feedback is a gift. That gift of people, like whether it's that peer that we were talking about, or your boss, your direct reports, it's a gift. And when we get that gift, that's why I put that big icon of a present there. How do you like that, Ellie? Use the Maron colors too. So when we receive that gift, we want to thank the giver graciously for their thoughtfulness and their effort. And even businesses do this. So I have this receipt over here from Home Depot. When you go to Home Depot, at the bottom of the receipt, at least the ones I get, it says, tell us how we did. Please fill out this short survey. And you'll have a chance to win $5,000, right? Why are they doing that? Because they recognize that feedback from their customers is a gift, and they want to receive it graciously. They recognize it takes thought and effort for a customer to take that receipt, go online and fill out that survey. So we want to do the same thing. We want to be gracious when we get feedback. Sometimes we'll solicit the feedback and we're prepared for that feedback. Sometimes it might be offered without a solicit. Sometimes it's offered skillfully, and sometimes it's not offered skillfully, right? But it's a gift, right? I have times when I mentioned when I was a new supervisor at the FBI, and I had some people on my team that weren't necessarily skillful in the way they gave me feedback, but they gave me feedback, and it was something I needed to hear. So I appreciated it, right? And I tried to act on it. And what I worry about is if I have clients that are trying to do the stakeholder-centered coaching at different forms, but they don't get any feedback. That's a little worrisome. Why aren't they getting feedback? I doubt it's because they're perfect, right? Because which one of us is perfect? So getting feedback is a good sign. Why is that a good sign? Well, you have these arrows here, these bullet points, because it shows that people care about our growth. For the most part, if we're asking for it and people give us a response, it's because they care. And they're willing to invest the time and effort to give us that feedback. And they feel safe enough, particularly if our direct reports, they feel safe enough to give us a feedback that we won't retaliate and that we won't take some negative action by giving the feedback. The other thing I found when I asked my employees, I was doing this even before I learned the stakeholder-centered coaching. This was something kind of came naturally to me. Like when I did performance reviews or things like that, I would say to my employees, okay, the first part of the conversation is going to be about my performance because my job is to help you succeed. This was with my direct reports. So I'd say, please tell me if you can think of anything, rack your brain. Anything I'm doing well, please let me know. Maybe I show up at work, right? I'm there. Whatever you can think of. And then tell me also what I could do different in the future. Feed forward. And I try to solicit that input from them because I said, my job is to help you succeed. So I want to know, am I helping you succeed? And then after we discuss my performance, then we'll talk about your performance, my perception of it, and your perception of it. And often I'd have their customers' perception of their performance as well. And what I found is that when I asked that performance reviews, like I did in midterms and the end of the year, first time they would give me pretty innocuous feedback. One of my employees said, Michael, when you come up to my cubicle, sometimes you become from behind and it startles me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was doing that. I'll try to come from the side, Jenny, so I don't startle you. I'm sorry for doing that. And so they would give me kind of innocuous feedback like that. And they'd see, did I get upset? Did I take it? Did I act on it? And then I think they gave me tougher feedback. And as I went along, Ellie, later in the year, after I asked repeatedly and didn't get upset, they'd give me tougher feedback. I was a new supervisor, a new function. Post 9/11, we had a lot of organizational change going on that we're helping to support. And my team said, wow, Michael, it seems like we have a lot on our plate and we're doing some things at the last minute. That was harder to hear. That wasn't like just coming up to the cubicle behind trying to come from the side. I said, okay. And I thought about it. I was like, they were right. And our team had proven ourselves. We were a new function in the FBI. And so now I could start turning down assignments and I could plan more and not put things at the last minute so we weren't overwhelmed. It was really good feedback that I needed to hear. But they didn't. I found that, Elliot, that it took a little while before they gave me the harder feedback. See, how do you handle the easier stuff? Did you get angry? Did you act on it? And then I would try to follow up. And then in the next performance review, I'd say in our last discussion, you told me I could get better at A, B, and C. How am I doing, Jenny? Am I coming from the side and not starting lead? How are we doing as a team? Am I still putting too much at the last minute? Are we still a bit overwhelmed? I'd ask, how am I doing? Did I follow up on what feedback you gave me? So it's important to show that we won't retaliate and we'll take it seriously.
Quick question for you, Michael, before we move on, and I wonder what some of our participants think, but depending on really what role you're in, I think you've kind of modeled how a boss can model best behavior for receiving feedback or even asking for feedback. But do you have a quick snapshot for some of our participants who may want to give feedback that don't necessarily have the space to do that, or they haven't been offered the opportunity to give this gift? But what advice do you have for them?
I do. If we could, I'm going to ask their colleagues' indulgence here, the people participating. I'm going to get to that in a few slides. So
perfect.
Let's start with guidelines for requesting feedback. Sometimes it's requested, sometimes it's not, but we'll also get into the guidelines for giving feedback. So let's keep that question in mind. This next slide here are the guidelines for requesting feedback. So if you're the one asking for feedback on your performance, or I would ask for feedback on my team's performance from our customers, when you do that, you want to be specific. I would like feedback on concise and positive, not like, hey, my boss told me I have to ask for feedback. No, we want to serve you. We want to support the mission of the FBI. How can we be even better at that, right? Let's be positive about that. And then when you start getting a response, you want to pay undivided attention. You've asked for it, right? And now they're going to take you seriously, hopefully, and give you some feedback. So pay attention to what they say. Number 3 here is capture. Take some notes. Capture what they said. That's another way of also showing you're taking it seriously. Number 4 is clarify what you heard. So you could be like, what I hear you saying, my lovely wife, is that sometimes I might be acting as if I care more about being right than trying to solve this. I might care more about being right than being in a loving relationship with you. Is that what you're sharing with me? And she might say, yes, you're actually listening. Yes, that is what I'm sharing, right? And so that clarifying what you heard, that's a step in active listening, is repeating back what you heard. You can do it in summary form. And something I remember talking with Bob Mueller about is that people might be communicating both the logic or reasoning, and they might also be communicating some emotion. It's not directly voiced. So you can also communicate that back. Wow, it sounds like my aggressive behavior in the past has made you seem hesitant to approach me. It seems like my lack of expressing gratitude has made you feel resentful. I'm sorry for that, right? They may not be voicing that directly, but there could be some underlying emotion too. That's something I often talk about with my, again, generalizations, both my male clients, they're not, and especially engineering, like directors of engineering or VPs of software engineering, they depend on, because of training and their predisposition, pay attention to the logic of what people are communicating and not necessarily emotion. So I'd say pay attention to both those things. And then don't make excuses. Oh, I'm sorry, I was so overwhelmed. I'm sorry, it's my first year as a supervisor. I'm sorry, this is just, I have a lot on my plate. Don't make excuses. That kind of negates what they're telling you. Say thank you. Thank you for your feedback, right? And be careful. Don't exhibit impatience or anger. Right? I can have an expressive face. So try to listen, understand the other person's perspective. One time I remember when I was the deputy chief knowledge officer of the FBI, the chief knowledge officer, he was giving some feedback. He had asked the supervisors reporting into me for some feedback and was passing it on to me, and I listened and responded. And he said, wow, it's like the best I've ever seen someone receive feedback. Right? I wanted to get better. I wanted to serve them better. We had an important mission. So I tried to be really receptive to that feedback. So there's some guidelines to receiving feedback. And now let's talk about guidelines for giving effective feedback, like that question we got, Ellie. So giving effective feedback is trying to be specific versus general. Sometimes I interview my clients' stakeholders if they want me to. And I interviewed one of my clients' bosses, who's like the vice president of this biotech company. And the boss said, my client, who's a division director, said, sometimes he's too nice. I was like, what does that mean? He's too nice. That's not very specific. How can my client take action on that? Right? You want him to start being mean to people? And we had a dialogue, and then we were able to get at something very specific, actionable that my client could do differently. It's like, how would he demonstrate that he's addressed this? And so that was a good conversation we had. Another thing for giving feedback is try not to judge. So I put an X through that symbol of the scales. We want to describe the behavior, not judge it. You're a jerk when. That's judgmental. No, just say what I've noticed, what I've observed, how I feel, right? Just describe versus judging. The third bullet here is focus on the behavior versus the person. So that's what we were just talking about. What I noticed is, what I observed is, not Michael, you're a jerk. Not Michael, you can't plan, right? No, what I've noticed is sometimes our team gets a bit overwhelmed and things could be pushed off to the last minute. That's a valid observation. And that's from their perspective. I happen to end up agreeing with them, right? But that would be a skillful way to deliver that feedback. The fourth thing here is maintain the relationship versus indulging in self-serving behavior. Sometimes the person may have made us angry. We may be angry by their behavior. Sometimes we just feel we're tired. We want to lash out. That's not necessarily an effective way to give feedback. That's indulging and self-serving, like of deflecting the blame yourself. The reason I'm behind is because you're a terrible boss. How is that going to be received? So I would invite the person or persons that are in the chat that wanted us to cover this in more in depth, how to give that feedback, if they could respond, and I'll say a little bit more about it, because I think they're also asking, what if you don't have the opportunity to give feedback? Sometimes companies have 360s, sometimes they have employee engagement surveys, sometimes a boss will come. And if you have to judge, not all bosses are open for feedback, but you can ask, hey boss, would it be okay if I offered you some feedback? I know you care. I want to give you some thoughts about how going forward in the future might be even more effective of working with me. Ellie, we have anything in the chat?
Nothing yet, but I'm grateful that you kind of led right into that, because it seems like that was pretty all-encompassing there. But we'll wait. I'll let you know if I hear anything else.
Okay. So when we move to this next slide, it's kind of related to that, giving feedback. So sometimes you might say, I'd like you to be better at this. Your client is too nice, right? Things like that. And then if you're asking for the feedback, or if your coach is asking for the feedback, and say, can you give me specific things? Provide specific suggestions of what I could do differently in the future. And Marshall has a word for this he made up called feed forward versus feedback. Feed forward. What could you do differently in the future that would exhibit he's having the behaviors you want him to do as a leader? So you want to make your suggestions straightforward, concrete, and actionable. Something they can actually do. And an outside observer could say, yes, he or she is doing that, or he or she is not doing that, right? Actionable, observable, concrete. Make it specific. If you can, they ask for it. And consider using the phrases. Here's a pro tip, as one of my colleagues once said, can say more of this or less of that. Hey boss, in the future, I'd like you to be a little more hands-on, right? You kind of threw it to us and then didn't know what to do. Or conversely, you have a micromanager. Hey boss, in the future, I'd like you to have a little less of direct management and trust us that we're doing it well, but check in with us periodically, right? A little more of this, kind of like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. A little more of this, a little less of that. That's a diplomatic way that you could be sharing feedback. And recognize that your feedback is your perspective and your suggestions that the receiver, the requester, does not have to act on. They may or may not decide to act on it. All right, how are we doing in the chat, Ellie?
Good. I think we got a couple folks saying, let's see. We got a very helpful, thank you. So it sounds like you did address what we were hoping for. And then someone said, thanks so much. Looks like they probably had a 3 p.m. So they said, thanks so much for your work on this. Thanks, Miriam, for joining us. But I think we're good in the chat.
Okay, terrific. Now we want to move into our interactive exercise. We get to practice these things we've talked about. So in this exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to move you into breakout rooms. And you're going to have a partner. One of you is going to first serve as the requester, asking for feedback. And then one of you will be the giver, giving feedback. And so if you got those handouts ready, that can be your reference. And maybe be brave to pick one of the things you think you do need to work on. One of those, maybe it's of those 20 things that we went through. And so you would request, and you would request positive, be concise. And then you hear, you listen, clarify what's heard. And that's what we want to practice, that process. So Ellie, thank you again for volunteering as we worked out. So we're going to demonstrate what this might look like. And so I'm going to be the requester of feedback, and then Ellie's going to be the giver of feedback, and it could be something like we're going to do right now. So Ellie, I would really love your feedback because I want to be a better colleague for you. I've been told that sometimes I share too much information, and I wanted to know what your thoughts about that. How am I doing on sharing too much information?
Let's see. This is a work in progress for me too. Well, thank you for coming to me asking for feedback. What I've witnessed in meetings is you providing many different solutions when potentially the right one might have already been said by a colleague. So what I suggest is next time allowing one of those first solutions to be the right one instead of potentially adding more to the conversation.
Thank you, Ellie, very much for your feedback. I really appreciate that. And if I got it correct, what I heard you say is that in meetings, sometimes there might be some suggestions that have been given, and instead of adding my own, really just go with one of the suggestions that the team came up with, not trying to modify it or add to it. Just go with it and let them run with it. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right. Thank you. So that's a short demonstration. You could have more detail to that, but we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to go ahead and practice that. And then once one of you has been the requester and one of you has been the giver, we want you to switch roles. And then so the other person has the chance to be the requester. So Ellie, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and put people into the breakout rooms. We'll give you a few minutes to practice this. Then we'll bring everyone back together and we'll ask for an outbrief on how that went.
Great. I am just putting the rooms together and making sure everybody has a space. Let's see. Okay. There you go, everybody.
Thank you.
So you can ignore yours. I think it automatically is trying to send you to one.
Okay. I'll go to that room just in case. I don't want anyone to be out.
Oh no, I've put you in a room solo just because I knew.
Okay. All right, terrific. I see there's 8 participants that maybe they didn't go to a room yet.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the pop-up on your screen, feel free to click into that now. If you're having trouble accessing your breakout room, just let me know.
All right, we've got a few more people joining their breakout rooms. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and accept that opportunity to go into a breakout room and practice these things that we went over. Then we'll call everyone back and outbrief that exercise. And Ellie, when we come back, will we be able to have people come on camera and audio?
Yeah, absolutely. They have the option to do that.
Terrific.
Okay, and we had a couple folks who had to step away for a moment that are going to wait until the next set of directions come through to make sure that they're fully briefed for their next breakout.
All right. So we can, if the people that are that stepped away and are back, they want to ask a question in the meantime, I'm happy to entertain any questions while the others are in their breakout room.
Great, absolutely. Yeah, I hope folks could hear that from Michael, and I'll send it in the chat too.
And Ellie, I understand we have about another half an hour left in the
Correct.
session.
Okay, I put that in the chat. We'll see what comes through there. You can let me know when you want me to tell folks to switch.
Okay, why don't you put a message in to say, consider switching now if the first person has had a chance to share.
Great.
Thank you for that, Ellie. And I understand we have about a half an hour more for this session. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, sorry if you couldn't hear me before. Absolutely, yeah, we have until 3:30.
Okay, terrific. So those of you that are still on in the main room, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, or I'm happy to do that now.
Looks like I got one privately, kind of circling back to some of the feedback that you were talking about. I know we talked about the requesting and the giver, you know, of having that open space, but can you kind of speak more in depth? It seems like about if you're not the requester or the giver isn't really, how can I phrase this the way it was worded? How can you kind of consider the feedback when you know, it hasn't been kind of received from someone? So if I were trying to give you the feedback like I did, and you weren't interested in hearing it, kind of what's the best pivot from there?
That's a good question. I'd say it depends. Right? It depends on the preferred receiver, right? If they are someone that could retaliate or wouldn't receive it well, might get angry, then maybe just don't try again, right? Just in self-preservation. However, if it's maybe that there would possibly be receptive, might think about the conditions of when to share the feedback, when they're relaxed, when there's time for it, when they're kind of in a good mood, when they prepare, maybe give a headline, hey, in our next one-on-one, could I give some feedback about how we could work even better together as a team, right? So there's conditions we can create that might make someone more receptive. Sometimes we might have a boss that seems very harried and stressed on our deadline, caught in between meetings. That's probably not the best time to give them feedback.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully that was helpful to the person that asked that question.
All right, let's give the breakout rooms a chance to wrap up. Maybe send them a quick message.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Looks like some people are coming back to the main room.
Yeah, everybody should be trickling on back now. And it looks like we already have one person who's put their camera on. And if anyone else feels comfortable putting their camera on, I think Michael's going to be asking for some reflection or maybe some feedback from that experience. So feel free to put your camera on.
All right, Ellie, if we could make sure everyone comes back, I think there's a way to indicate that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So thank you all for participating in that exercise. And in a moment, what we want to do is hear a few people kind of reporting out what their experience was of doing that exercise and what it was like being the giver, what it was like being the receiver. Love to hear your feedback in just a moment once we have everyone back. What's it looking like, Ellie? Do we have most people back? Or?
Yep, we do. I got a couple of messages for folks who had to hit their 3 o'clock meetings for East Coasters. So looks like folks back.
Okay, terrific. So if you're able to report out, you could come on camera, turn off the mute, and share what was your experience? Like, what role did you play? What did it feel like? What kind of feedback did you get? Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah. So I guess being the giver, the one giving feedback, I felt like it was definitely a relief being able to share my concerns, and then having my supervisor or boss be receptive and willing to work around or address my concerns. So that was definitely nice to kind of like get that off my shoulders. And then I guess the other way around, being the receiver, I would say that was actually the harder role. Just because when they tell you, hey, this is some concerns I have, you're just like, whoa, you're shocked, right? You don't really, you didn't really know, and you're like, and then you quickly trying to think of, okay, well, how can I address their concerns? And so I think when you're receiving it, you have to do more thinking out of, okay, how do I help that person? How do I address their concerns?
Great. Thank you very much, Thomas. Yeah, it's a difference is one might be harder than the other for us. So it sounds like for Thomas, you're saying receiving that feedback can be harder. And how do I act on it, respond in a positive way? Might come out of the blue, might feel like it's coming out of the blue for you, right? Thank you, Thomas. Anyone else want to share their experience? Again, can come off mute and come on camera. Love to hear your experience of the breakout session.
Feel free to put it in the chat as well, if you'd like.
I'm here with my little 5-month-old, and we're both trying to figure out how to become good leaders. So we shall do this together. But he just woke up. But anyway, I thought it was very insightful to think about how to share things constructively in a non-judgmental way, and just in a positive way, and in some ways how you would want to hear it. I think that's what kind of comes out. It's like if you think about how you want to receive feedback, then it kind of informs how you decide to give feedback. Like what will help you hearing about your flaws, and how, you want to reflect on it and then act on it too. It's like the same way it kind of informs the way that you present it to the other person. So that was encouraging to hear and think about. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
Great. Thank you for sharing, and hello to your little one there.
Yeah.
Good team effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyone else? Hello. Anyone else like to share? All right. And what we like to do is move into our second exercise. And I'm going to bring back my slides. So we just completed exercise number 1. And now we want to move into exercise number 2. So using the materials, and we're going to put you back with the same partner. What we like to do is with the feedback that was provided, evaluate what you want to work on. Because as we mentioned in one of the earlier slides, just because you got feedback doesn't mean you necessarily want to follow through with the suggestion that they have. So some of the things that I've gone through with clients before is, so let's say they say, oh, I really think, this is one of the suggestions, like, I really think we should have Mac computers for us that are doing design. And say, well, okay, that's a good suggestion. I can see how it'd be helpful for you as a designer used to using Mac computers for design. However, that's not what we have in this network, and it would cost this amount of dollars. So you might, after you've gotten the feedback, go back and think and evaluate the suggestion about how to support them more, but doesn't mean necessarily agree, right? Might be, or you might agree with the general feedback, but not the specific action to take to solve that feedback. And maybe they say, Michael, I think you need to be more participative in our one-on-one discussions. You might say, okay, yeah, I could see that in one-on-one discussions, but maybe I should be more participative in our team discussions too. So you might want to adapt their feedback and apply it in a different way. So what I like you to do is when you get back to your breakout rooms with your partners, talk about the feedback you got and then how you might put it into action. You could talk about how long it might take to accomplish it. Like, is it something you could do next week, in 2 weeks, in a month? It might be a different timeline depending on the type of feedback and what you got on your plate. And then think through what obstacles might come in the way. Well, I might try to hold back my giving my suggestion in the meeting, like Ellie was giving me feedback, but I'm always tempted to do that. And so you might say, okay, how am I going to hold back myself from doing that? What's an obstacle? Like I might feel that temptation, might just go with it. That might be an obstacle. So how am I going to remind myself when I get into the meeting and feel that temptation not to go into the old habits? So that could be an obstacle. So I'd like you to think about that. Now, I know some people have come in and some people have left. So Ellie, I guess we're just going to pay attention to that, make sure everyone has a partner when you go to the breakout rooms. It doesn't have to be your same partner, but you could use the feedback you got in the earlier exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be able to send off to the same breakout room. So when you see the message pop up on your screen, just head back with your partner, and I'll do that right now. See something.
Thank you, Ellie.
Sure.
It looks like we still have a few people in the main room, and if you're not able to go into the breakout room, or it wouldn't be useful to your learning right now, if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have while the others are in the breakout room.
Okay, I'm monitoring the chat, Michael, to see if anyone comes through. Looks like people got a little shy when they had to go to their breakout rooms this afternoon. So we might have lost a couple people, but I'm grateful for those who have stuck through this really valuable opportunity that you've been providing. But looks like we got a question about someone having trouble receiving feedback without kind of reacting emotionally. I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier in your slides, but do you have any advice for someone who is really open to feedback, but may struggle with just emotionally receiving some of that potentially critical feedback when you know they're trying their best and really working hard?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. I think we have two categories of situations where that could happen. One is you might expect the feedback to come. So if someone made an appointment or you're going to do some performance discussion and you expect some feedback, you can anticipate it and prepare for it. And so one thing I do with a lot of clients is we do a little meditative breathing. You can take deep breaths in, deep breaths out, deep breaths in, deep breaths out. This has both a physiological benefit in helping to calm us, and also it helps us be more present, and usually it only takes a couple minutes. So I know a lot of people are in business environments on Zoom. So if you have a little time in between the Zoom meetings to do that breathing exercise, or go off camera on mute and do a little breathing exercise before you have that crucial conversation, as it's called sometimes. And you can do that breathing as the giver or the receiver and make sure you're present and calm, more skillful, as I call it, in delivering or receiving that feedback. So now that's when it's anticipated. That's kind of the easier one to handle. With when you're not anticipating, say it's kind of sprung on you, that's more challenging. And then I would say reflect on the intent. So as I mentioned, I thought of my job as a senior manager, my job is to help others be successful. And so I try to say, okay, and I want to have a relationship with my team members. I wanted them to feel they can trust me, that I'm supportive, that I help them. So I try to reflect on that intent, even if it's surprising me, even if it's not skillfully delivered, even if I have, a lot on my plate at that moment. I try to reflect on that intent. And so I bring that to the forefront. And also that I want the feedback to continue. So I was like, well, I better handle this one well, right? If I boggle this one, then I probably won't get feedback and I'll be cut off from a great information source. That's another part of my intent in getting feedback.
That's awesome. I mean, I really appreciate all the breathing techniques in the beginning. I think that's an underutilized technique. And we have someone in the chat saying, thanks for that. So glad we still have some folks listening in that aren't in breakout rooms. I have one more question that came in, but wanted to check with you to see timeline wise when you wanted me to bring folks back from the breakout rooms.
Maybe, Thomas, like one more minute or so, and then go ahead and bring them back.
Okay, great. I will let them know, give them about 30 seconds or so. The second question that came through was about timeliness. I know you mentioned that, when you've received feedback in the past, you'll check back to see, hey, have you, am I approaching your desk from the right side instead of from behind, like you asked? How long do you usually wait to talk about that? Or does that just come once a year, like most folks kind of annual review, or what would you recommend?
It depends on the feedback information. So if, say, Jenny's desk, if I happen, let's say I go to her desk every day, then I could say, a week later, how have I been doing, right? She might have hopefully seen a change in my behavior, something simple like that. If it's a habit and the people giving our stakeholders might not see us regularly, then you could say, in this past month, how have I been doing? And that's usually what we do with the stakeholder-centered coaching. And we'll be getting to that cycle in just a minute about what that might look like. But it depends. I was doing it too infrequently because I hadn't been exposed to stakeholder-centered coaching. I was doing it at the mid-year and the end of the year. That's probably too infrequent, too much time in between. So I learned to do that better.
Oh, great. Okay. And it looks like just in time, we have our folks back from the breakout rooms.
Okay, great. So once again, I want to invite those of you that were able to have this kind of discussion, if you could come off mute and on camera and share your experience of the exercise number 2, where you talked about taking action on some of the feedback that you received. Who would like to share?
Yeah, I'll start. I think the takeaway from our group was to kind of stay on top of the issues that were brought up in our conversation, whether it be either weekly or monthly check-in, just to make sure there's been improvement and that we're continuing to work on it. So it's not like whether it's the giver or receiver, it's not like a one-time conversation. It's really something that you want to continue to go at and make progress on.
Terrific. Thank you, Thomas. Is there anyone else that would like to share? You can either come on camera, or you could share in the chat. If you're a bit shy or not camera ready, we'll take your experience feedback in any way you'd like to deliver it. Trying to model good behavior, Ellie. Like, take the feedback any way we can get it.
Absolutely. I love it. I'll keep monitoring the chat and I'll let you know if anything comes through.
Oh, looks like Mary is, are you ready to speak, Mary?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I joined late, so I wasn't in the last breakout room. So I'm excited to watch this session back again. But my question was about how to respond not emotionally to feedback. So I appreciated your thoughts there.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, and maybe sometimes we have and just add on to the thing that I shared when you were in the main room and the others were in the breakout room, is you might have a very expressive face, right? And I'd say, oh boy, right? And it's like, so you could try to school that. And we talked about breathing. If you can anticipate that you're going to get the feedback. And the other thing we talked about was keeping in mind the intent, is preserving that relationship, wanting the feedback to continue so you can keep getting better at every level. It tends to get harder to get feedback as you go up the chain. Later on, I served in Director Comey's office, in Director Mueller's office. Then when Jim Comey became the FBI director, I moved on to a different position at the FBI, but I noticed he very much tried to get feedback and be there present with the FBI employees. He's super tall guy. I mean, if you ever see him with his wife, he's like, looks like he's a foot taller than her. I'm pretty short, so he's much taller than me. And so he had the added dimension, not only being the FBI director who'd go meet with the president in the Oval Office, but he would also be so tall. Like, so he was talking to people, he was like towering over them, even our agents. And so what he tried to do is be in casual settings with them to invite feedback more. And in the Starbucks, we actually had a Starbucks in the FBI headquarters, or in line in the cafeteria. So those are ways that he tried to be more open to feedback. Now, let me move on to our content, because I think it relates to the question that we were getting about how often to ask and what that cycle looks like. So the skills for involving stakeholders is we want to ask, and we practice that. We want to listen to the feedback we get, and then we want to thank them. This is, I think, thank in sign language. We want to then think about, now this is what I say to my clients when they're receiving the feedback, this makes it easier. You don't have to do the thinking stage while the person is still in front of you. So Mary, I feel like you're worried about your emotional response, just thank them and stop and say, yeah, thank you so much for your feedback. I'm going to give that some thought and I'm going to come back to you. Right? That gives you some breathing space, especially if you were surprised by it. And then you can school yourself, do your meditation, hug your security blanket, whatever it takes, then go back to them later and then say, I've thought about what you had to say. I really appreciate that. And this is what I want to do in response. And that's continuing the cycle. Then if you agreed with it, is you change. You show them and you let them know why you're changing. One of my team members gave me the feedback, hey, we tend to meet every week. Could our team meet every 2 weeks? So if I make that change, don't let them guess why I now made the meeting every 2 weeks. Is let them know based on some feedback that I got from a team member, and many of you agreed, I'm now switching our meeting to every 2 weeks. Don't let them guess. Tell them it's because of their feedback. And you follow up. And that was a question we got. How often do you follow up? In a stakeholder-centered coaching, on average, we say for the past month. So they've had a chance to see it, hopefully, a change in behavior, because they're not paying attention to us every minute. They're not with us every minute, our stakeholders. So you can say in the past month, how have I been doing? Have I been less arrogant? Or have I been presenting with confidence, right? You asked them for that feedback in the past month. So they've had a chance to observe, hopefully, a change in behavior. Now they may not, so you got to be ready for that too. Maybe not because you changed, but they've got the things on their own plate. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Or, I missed that meeting. Or whatever it might be. That's okay. That's okay. But if you ask them to be a stakeholder and expect them to pay attention, you say, hey, could you give me feedback next month? Can I come back to you and ask? Then they probably will pay attention and they'll have something for you. So you can have that cycle and you can repeat that each month. And so what I also wanted to share is this is a kind of comprehensive guide of the steps we talked about: asking, listening, thanking, thinking about it, changing, and follow up. And it has the do's and the do nots. Kind of like the Yoda, there's either do or do not, right? And so these are the things to keep in mind as you do those steps. And I would love to keep the conversation going. So if you contact me, and you can choose whatever way you want to contact me on the next screen, I'll show you the ways to contact me. I will send you this. This comes from Frank Wagner, Chris Coffey, and Marshall Goldsmith. So I have their permission to share this with you. I'll share this with you, and I'll send it to you if you're interested in kind of having the whole steps, step 1 through 7, laid out for you as a quick reference guide on how to involve stakeholders and get their feedback. And so how do you get in touch with me? That's this next screen. Have my telephone number, my email address, my company website, and I put a big logo there. I really like LinkedIn, so we can have a conversation and keep it going. So I hope you can reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn or any of these other ways, or I guess you could find some other way to contact me. But I'd love to keep this conversation going. I want to thank Ellie and the University of Maryland Alumni Association for inviting me to be with you, and for all your participation and your sharing. I appreciate it. Thank you. Back to you, Ellie.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your time and your expertise, and specifically sharing all those wonderful stories from your past. We will have a recording of this webinar sent out to all participants and all registrants, and I'll be sure to include Michael's information so you can reach out to him with your own personal questions, or if you want to strike up a conversation with him. So thank you everyone again for joining us and for your participation in today's webinar. We hope to see you at another event during Career Week. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Stay healthy and go Terps.
Go Terps.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.